From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Destruction and death, and that's what war is about. So you stuff your emotions and you ignore them. It's like a credit card, it goes on credit, but then the bill comes due.
I'm always kind of aware of my surroundings, possible, danger points.
I wanted to come home, but when I got back, I started missing. I started applying for all these jobs to work back over in Iraq, and finally I got one.
My motto is failure's not an option. Because once the first soldier came home in a flag-draped coffin, let's finish it, let's do the job.
She had a little bit more of a flair to her temper and more stern, more aggressive than she had been.
I was getting very little sleep. If I wasn't drinking, I wasn't getting much sleep at all. If I did sleep, I was having nightmares, waking up, screaming, sweating.
War changes everyone exposed to it. Some learn valuable lessons, some have physical wounds, many have emotional wounds that may or may not heal over time. Every soldier has a different reaction to the trauma of combat. On March 7, 2004, the 459th Reserve Engineering Company came home to West Virginia. In the previous installments of Bridgeport to Baghdad, several soldiers and their families told their stories, from enlistment to deployment. Tonight on Outlook, how they became a citizen again.
This is Outlook, a reflection of our place, our time, and our people.
I was really impressed with how the local people here really went out of their way to make us feel welcome. And there was fire trucks and state troopers and county sheriffs and city police, ambulance. It was just overwhelming. It hit me all at once, it's finally over after all this time. And by then it'd been over 400 days.
I think if the night that he left was the worst night of my life, the night he came home was probably one of the best.
I imagined what it would be like when he stepped off the bus, and it was even better than I had imagined.
When they came in on those buses, that was so great. It was like, I told my husband, I said, gee, this is like giving birth to him again, and he's back. But yeah, it was the greatest day.
It's hard to put that into words. And it really didn't hit me that it was finally over until I was here in this parking lot with it looked like 2,000 or 3,000 people were here, packed in around us. I mean, it was so crowded you could hardly even walk through this place. And that's when it finally hit me that it was over.
Veterans must fit back into families and communities that have changed in their absence. Even those they are closest to often cannot comprehend the experiences of a combat soldier.
Our unit was right up in the front, and so we were going straight into Baghdad in the midst of heavy battle. We went through Nasiriyah, Marines were dying, bullets were flying everywhere, there were dead bodies lying around. At any given second, we could have been shot, and we had no idea. We had no idea where anything was really coming from.
It's like all these emotions kept coming out, and it was the most wonderful thing when we saw your buses coming into the unit up there.
I was ready to come home. Well, you're gone for a year. away from your buddies like your family, and I don't know. It was easy to get used to coming back here, you know, but I wanted to come home, but when I got back, I started missing. I started applying for all these jobs to work back over in Iraq, and finally I got one. And I love the job I'm working now, so.
It's like, you know, it was really exciting as soon as I crossed over to, you know, into West Virginia. Then I started to get a little nervous, like, you know, how, you know, because I was afraid I was going to be smothered by my family. I mean, I wanted, you know, everyone just to kind of back off and just, you know, they had all these big trips planned, and I guess that's natural. I'm sure you guys did too, and I just wanted a little bit of alone time.
I'd had, you know, someone around me 24/7. Someone was always there, someone was always talking to you, you know, and it's nothing against the people I was with.
Staff Sergeant Brian Lakatos was a squad leader and 14-year veteran of the reserves.
My hobbies have been put on a hold for such a long time that I just wanted to go out and I wanted to do my hobbies. You know, I shoot black powder and build muzzleloader rifles. I wanted to go shooting. I like hiking in the woods. I wanted to go hiking. And so I think the biggest thing I wanted to do is I wanted to see my family, and I wanted to be around, you know, my wife, you know, but I wanted some me time.
One of the ways I think it's changed me is I think I'm a little more selfish now. I hate saying that, but I worry a little bit more about me and about mine than I did before. My life is here. And I think I hold that so dear that I don't let anything get in the way of that at all. I think that's how the war has changed me.
I guess I've learned that life can get a whole lot worse than what it is, you know? And some of the things that you think are important aren't actually important. So I've been able to deal with, you know, tough times probably a little bit better, you know? You don't really, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. So.
It was common for the 459th to run convoys in Iraq. They learned to be aware of every possible danger. This hyper-awareness helps keep soldiers alive in combat. Yet when Brian returned, he kept his alert system.
I'm always kind of aware of my surroundings, possible, you know, danger points, possible, you know, areas that could, you know, cause me to some time in the future or something that needs to be done. I am aware of that. You know, I guess, you know, I'm also, like, if you look into a crowd, you can kind of maybe pick up on, maybe if two people are arguing, you can probably pick up on possible trouble points. But yes, the hyper-awareness, absolutely.
The specific events for me in Iraq that I think still continue to haunt me today all occurred in the first couple of weeks. We started witnessing a lot of the dead bodies that were everywhere. I mean, it was, we came through a couple of scenes specifically where buses had been blown up and they were full of mostly civilian people, women and children that had been burned. Just really, really bad images, you know. When I came in from Iraq, I think it's in the mindset of a lot of people that are over there. One of the first things we want to do is go have a drink, because you can't drink over there. So, you know, that was one of the first things I wanted to do. I wanted to go out. I wanted to feel quote unquote normal again. Maybe go hang out with some of my friends and have a couple of drinks. Well, it didn't take very long for me to realize that those drinks really helped me get some sleep. You know, I went from having maybe a couple of beers to drinking pretty heavily 4 or 5 nights a week when I came home. I was getting very little sleep. If I wasn't drinking, I wasn't getting much sleep at all. If I did sleep, I was having nightmares, waking up screaming, sweating, and the alcohol was a way for me to at least stay asleep through that. I was becoming a detriment to myself and my family and friends, and I started getting to a point where I was isolating more as I was doing it, I was avoiding going out and being around anybody, and I would stay in my apartment and drink, or if I was going out, I wasn't going out until late at night, and going to smaller, quiet bars where I could just essentially be by myself or with another friend and just drink.
At the Wheeling Vet Center, team leader John Looney counsels combat veterans. In Vietnam, he was part of a long-range reconnaissance team. That experience gives him credibility with the vets who go there when they're having difficulties transitioning from war to home.
Destruction and death, that's what war is about. I wish there was some pleasant way to say that, but war's not pleasant. Picture is worth a lot, but to be there, to smell it, to experience it, to feel the dust in your lungs and the smell of death, smell of cordite. You also smell the urine, the feces, all those sorts of things, and that's very striking and overwhelming. So you stuff your emotions and you ignore them, but then it comes to where it's like a credit card. It goes on credit, but then the bill comes due, and that's what we do at the Vet Center. When the symptoms start coming out, sleeplessness, dreams, irritability, troubles in relationships, isolation, all those things start coming out, and that's the credit card saying, it's your unconscious saying, it's time to deal with the emotions.
In 2007, a Department of Defense task force found that 3 to 4 months after returning home, 1/3 of regular Army soldiers were experiencing mental health issues. That figure is even higher, 1/2, for National Guard and reservists.
Well, whenever I got back, I'd ask the kids, what do you want to do? We've been going away from each other all this time. What do you want to do? Well, they want to go to the beach.
Specialist Dorothy Workman was a heavy wheel mechanic with the 459th. She traveled in many of their convoys in case there was a breakdown. Aggressive driving was sometimes a necessity so the convoys didn't become easy targets for snipers and bombers.
As soon as I came back, Sean was wanting me to come to school in my uniform. So he got a big kick out of that. We went to his class, and I thanked the kids for making me the poster and the sign.
She was a lot different, snappier. Dorothy was, before she went, was the easygoing. You just didn't get her mad. That just, everything was okay. We'll just work it out. We'll just listen. She had a little bit more of a flair to her temper and more stern, more aggressive than she had been. The driving was atrocious. That's what sticks out in my mind the most was the driving. We'd get on the interstate and it was, okay, I'll drive back. Because I guess they just, the way they drove over there, they just, it was just a whole different story when she got over here. Cause
it was tough. They growed up a lot while I was gone. They had really matured quite a bit, just having to take care of each other and things that they had went through while I was gone. Miss Lee, she helped look after the boys, so she matured quite a bit. Henry, he went from a little short, chunky dude to a tall, skinny dude. And Dakota, he had started school, so I didn't get to see him. I got on the bus, so that was tough. But
God is great and God is good, and we're thankful for His food. By His hands we must be fed. Give us, Lord, daily bread. Amen.
Back by the trees behind the two buildings.
And there were probably 15 to 20 of us that were firing. downrange, so to speak, at groups of people, some civilians, some not. We don't really know, but they started firing at us first, so we all returned fire. I was told later on by my squad leader at the time that he knows that I had at least one confirmed kill. I had a hard time dealing with that for a while, and I still think about that sometimes. And then out of nowhere, up the road, here comes this car flying towards us, and a guy hanging out the window firing his gun in our direction. So the tanks and some of our guys again started firing on that car, and the tanks just destroyed that car. And the guy and his wife and child, who ended up coming out of the car after him, they were okay. I think they were in the back seat, but he opened up. I remember him opening up the driver's side door and just kind of falling out of the car, laying on the road. She was trying to pull him off of the road because people, when they saw that it was a woman and a child, they stopped firing on her. But at that point in time, they made the wise decision that we needed to just get out of this area.
How's that work? Huh? Is that going to work for you?
Well, Jeremy was, he's always been an overachiever as a teenager, excelled in sports, grades in school. I'm not bragging on him or anything like that, but I'm just telling you that as a parent, he wasn't much problem at all. He was a good kid. When he got back, he was full of torment, I thought. He was definitely carrying his emotions on his sleeve. Anxiety. I was worried. I was just worried about it. I didn't know what to do, and things like that. But he was, of course, he was a man then. Totally 100% had his own mind. His focus was gone, though. His sense of direction at that time. I wanted to be with him as much as I could, and thankfully he lived in the area that I live in. It was scary. It was. You didn't want to say the wrong thing to him. I couldn't really detect what it is that he wanted, what he expected from us, and the expectations we had from him. We didn't want to go there because of his demeanor at that time. So you had to be cautious for his sake. So it was he was a different person.
The first week that I was home, I remember some thunderstorms that occurred, and these are thunderstorms that I don't think I had ever heard before. The thunder and lightning was very, very intense. And I remember that's the first time that I experienced the hypervigilance when I was home. I remember becoming very panicked, very upset, anxious. And as a result of all these things occurring, I thought that I needed to get some help and maybe go talk to somebody.
So Jeremy comes in and says, I just got back. And I said, okay, what's happening with you now? And he talked about his symptomology. And I said, look, this is normal for us combat veterans. Welcome to my world. Yeah. And so he gets an idea of how he needs to adjust. See, when he came back, his perception of himself changed because he had done some things he never thought he'd have to do. And the other thing is his worldview changed.
John Looney knew Jeremy was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Warriors returning from combat have experienced this for thousands of years, but it wasn't until 1980 that the American Psychiatric Association defined it. PTSD is caused by a traumatic event in which the person saw or experienced serious injury or death, and their reaction was intense fear, helplessness, or horror. The more often a person is exposed to these incidents, the more likely they are to develop PTSD. Even after returning safely home, PTSD can cause exaggerated responses to events that remind the veteran of combat danger. It can also force combat memories to unpredictably intrude. Jeremy's inability to sleep, his nightmares, his physical reactions to noise and chaos, his quick temper, and his withdrawal from friends and family are all symptoms of PTSD. A recent survey conducted by the state legislature found that 1/3 of Iraq and Afghanistan vets living in West Virginia reported symptoms indicating they had PTSD. Almost half reported clinical depression. After his return, Jeremy moved to Morgantown to earn a master's in social work. He met children's therapist Susan Harold, and they started dating.
The very first thing that I ever really saw from him is I came home from class and I hadn't replaced the paper towel holder, paper towels on the paper towel holder. And he had whipped it across the room and he's like, all I'm asking is that you replace paper towels. And I'm thinking, what is this guy's problem? And so I left and, went back to my apartment. And I'm thinking, I didn't sign up for this. I'm not gonna, deal with being yelled at when I walk in the door. The interesting thing in our relationship is that I worked with children with PTSD, so I understood what the diagnosis was. I didn't understand living with it. That has been a learning experience. I had to learn through him, though, what caused his. And so I can remember we sat on the couch in that apartment, and, he just talked to me about things that he had seen and things that he had to do when he was over there. And it was just listening. I mean, really just took listening. You want to console, you want to say, I understand, or you want to say it's okay, or you're just human, you did what your job was. You want to say these things, but they don't really make any difference. You don't understand. All you can say is that you care about them regardless of what they've had to do. Well, therapy has to be an ongoing process. And so with Jeremy, before I met him, he had initiated the process of going to therapy. But like many other vets, didn't continue. Starts to feel better, stops seeing signs and symptoms, stops going to therapy. And so as we've gone through our relationship, there's been certain times where I have been really, he says instrumental, I say, it's just something that has to be done in order to preserve this relationship. I see a backslide of depression where he doesn't, want to get up and do normal activities that he was doing. Increase in fighting, increase in mean words that he says to me or to other people. It's really been a process of encouraging him then to get back to therapy. So saying, I'll help you find somebody to go to. I'll go with you, but this has to happen. You need to go and talk to somebody.
So that was one of the issues that I began to address. Medication, for one. I started taking sleep medication, which worked, and it continues to work today. It really does help. Talk therapy has become a really good way to get those intrusive thoughts, those inner thoughts that I have about whatever related to being in the military or anything in life, really. Talking about it has become a really good way for me to loosen up, so to speak, and be able to relax a little bit more. That tension ball isn't squeezed so tight. And so through those two things, I think I've been able to, and obviously the help of my loving wife, it's really come a long way, and helping me get things under control, so to speak.
Hello? Yeah, this is Jeremy.
Jeremy now works for the Wheeling Vet Center as a therapist. The vets that talk to him know that he's been there and understands both the stress of combat and the emotional pain that may haunt them when they return. Jeremy frequently gives workshops to other mental health workers so they will understand combat trauma.
Just by a show of hands, how many of you know somebody that served in combat? There you go. Combat veterans are a group of people who do not like to talk about what's going on with them. They don't want to talk about their problems. They want to talk about what they've seen. They don't want to talk about what they've done. Returning from a combat zone is difficult for anyone. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, your background, how strong you think you are. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's life-changing, and it's a permanent life change. Things will never be the same. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about people, life, God, and so I use that experience I compare it to everyday things that are going on back here, and I realize that life is too short to go unhappy. And so by taking advantage of the things that are out there that have been established to help veterans reintegrate and readjust into society, life can be wonderful, and that's why we're here.
The other 459th Reservists we followed also transitioned from combat soldiers to civilian jobs.
That I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me.
According to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
According to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Tim Wilfong re-enlisted into the reserves and was promoted to Staff Sergeant. He continued to drive a truck for Crete Carrier Corporation. Steve Volk left the reserves to take a job with Blackwater Worldwide. At the time, it was the largest of the private security firms protecting State Department employees in Iraq.
The monthly payments will be $25 and the finance charge will be 2%.
Brian Lakatos returned to the teaching job that had been held for him. After 14 years in the reserves, he did not re-enlist. Dorothy Workman went back to her job at Symington Windows. She re-enlisted in the reserves and has been promoted to sergeant. 2 years after they came home, the families and members of the 459th, both those still serving and those who had been discharged, gathered at their armory in Bridgeport. They were there to be honored by Army senior staff for their service in Iraq and to receive commemorative flags and medals. As the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan continue, some West Virginia National Guard and reservists will again be mobilized for active duty. They will repeat the odyssey from training and deployment to the dangers of combat and the stress on their families. And then, hopefully, they will all come home and face the challenges of peace.
To watch online or see extended interviews, go to our website,